Hey everyone, welcome. If you're gearing up for your AWS Solutions Architect exam, you know just how critical security is. So today, we're doing a deep dive into one of the most important security features you'll encounter, IAM Database Authentication. Let's get right into it.
So, let me ask you something. Are database passwords your biggest security risk? I mean, think about it for a second. How many times have we seen a password just sitting in a config file, or even worse, accidentally checked into a Git repository? It happens all the time, and it's a huge problem. Today, we're talking about the solution.
All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about why traditional passwords are such a headache. Then we'll jump into the IAM solution and see how it works its magic with the token flow. After that, we'll cover which database services actually support this, and maybe more importantly, which ones don't. And finally, we'll wrap up with the limitations you absolutely need to know as an architect.
So, let's start with the big issue here. For years and years, the standard way to connect our applications to our databases has been with static, long-lived passwords. And frankly, it's always been a weak link in our security posture.
I mean, we've all seen this, right? Credentials just hard-coded in a config file. It is a disaster just waiting to happen. And what about rotating those passwords? It's an absolute nightmare. You often have to coordinate application restarts, and it's just a complex, risky process that nobody enjoys. On top of all that, there's no single place to manage who has access to what. It's just messy.
So, if static passwords are the villain of this story, who's the hero? Well, AWS gives us a much more secure and manageable way to handle this, using a service you already know and probably use every day, IAM.
So what is it exactly? At its core, it's a feature that lets you connect to your database using an IAM identity, like an IAM user, or more commonly, an IAM role, instead of a traditional username and password. This completely eliminates the need to store those static, risky passwords inside your application.
This slide really lays out the difference, and it is night and day. We're moving away from these static, long-lived credentials and replacing them with temporary authentication tokens. Instead of passwords scattered in config files, everything is managed centrally through IAM policies. And that whole painful process of manual password rotation, gone. It's replaced by automatic token expiration. It's a huge upgrade.
Now, for your exam, these are the benefits you absolutely need to burn into your memory. First and foremost, security is massively enhanced. No more hard-coded secrets. Second, you get centralized management. You use standard IAM policies to control exactly who or what can connect to your database. Operationally, life gets so much easier. And finally, the credentials themselves are temporary. These tokens only last for 15 minutes, which drastically reduces the window of opportunity if one were ever compromised.
Okay, so how does this magic actually happen under the hood? It's not just a simple switch. There's a really clever and secure flow that makes it all possible, and understanding this is key. So here's how it goes down. Your application, which is running with an IAM role, uses the AWS SDK to make a call to AWS and says, hey, I need a token to access this database. IAM then checks that role's policies to make sure it's actually allowed to do that. If everything checks out, IAM generates a special, short-lived token and sends it back. Your application then takes that token and uses it as the password to connect to the database. And then, after just 15 minutes, that token becomes completely useless.
I love this analogy. Just think of it like a key card for a hotel room that stops working after 15 minutes. It gets you in once, it's specific to you, and it's incredibly temporary. This is what makes the whole system so much more secure than a password that could be valid for months or even years.
Okay, this is a classic exam gotcha question. So, listen up. You need to know which services support a specific feature. IAM authentication is incredibly powerful, but you can't use it everywhere. Let's take a look at the compatibility list.
All right, pay close attention here because this is prime exam material. You can see it works with our big relational players, RDS and Aurora, for both MySQL and Postgres flavors. Redshift is also on the list. But here's the part you really need to remember. The services that do not support it. That's Amazon DocumentDB and Amazon ElastiCache. For those, you'll need a different strategy. And the go-to answer for the exam is almost always AWS Secrets Manager.
Now, as we know, nothing in tech is perfect. Every architectural decision involves trade-offs. And while IAM authentication is amazing for security, there's one very specific performance limitation that you, as an architect, absolutely have to be aware of, especially for really high-throughput applications.
200. Remember that number.
For Aurora MySQL specifically, there's a soft limit of about 200 new IAM authenticated connections per second. Why? Well, each of those new connections has to go through that token generation process we just talked about, and that adds a tiny bit of overhead.
And this quote from the docs really explains the "so what" behind that number. That process of generating a token isn't free. It takes a little bit of time and processing. For most apps, you'll never even notice it. But if you have an application that is just hammering the database, opening and closing hundreds of connections every single second, you can actually run into connection throttling.
The key phrase here is connection churn. It's not about how many total connections you have open. It's all about how many new connections you're creating every second. This can be a real issue for certain architectures, like some serverless applications. So what's the fix? Well, that's where a service like RDS Proxy comes in. It sits in front of your database and maintains a pool of warm, ready-to-go connections, which completely sidesteps this limitation.
All right, let's bring it all home. Let's do a rapid-fire recap of what you need for the exam. Number 1, IAM Authentication swaps static passwords for temporary 15-minute tokens. 2, it boosts security by centralizing everything in IAM. 3, know the services. It's supported by RDS, Aurora, and Redshift, but it is not supported by DocumentDB or ElastiCache. 4, remember that 200 new connections per second limit and know that RDS Proxy is your friend for high-turn workloads. And finally, number 5, if you can't use IAM Auth, your go-to solution is AWS Secrets Manager.
And that leaves us with this final big picture question. We've seen its incredible security benefits, but we've also seen its specific performance limitations. As a solutions architect, your job is to weigh these trade-offs. It's a powerful, modern, and secure tool, for sure, but knowing when to use it and when you might need to pair it with something like RDS Proxy, well, that's what separates a good architect from a great one.